The question is that this bill be now read a second time. I call the member for Wright.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I rise to speak about the issue that I'm very passionate about, and that is Marriage Equality Amendment Bill 2012. I realise that the discussion of this issue are highly contentious and affects all the communities. The electorate of Wright, of which I serve, is no different. I start by saying that I'm a firm believer that if a fellow politician wants to be brave, that they should stand up before the election and take this issue as an election platform to the next level in order to win government. I don't agree with the wider views that marriage in Australia has changed since 2010 federal election, and I wholeheartedly support the coalition in believing that the definition of marriage as contained in its existing provisions for the Marriage Act of 1974 appropriately affects the common understanding of marriage in the Australian community, the union of a man and a woman to the exclusion of all others voluntarily entered into for life. I repeat that I'm not persuaded that this definition should be changed. It is not a piece of legislation that can nor should be considered lightly. The effect of making any changes to the Marriage Act as it currently stands will have many psychological and social implications, which at this point in time are not well researched and understood, and I'm not just talking about the welfare of children. Firstly, I must highlight to this Parliament, Mr Speaker, that I was brought up in a family with strong Christian values, and while I'm no saint, I stand by these values because they have been and continue to be a fundamental moral compass for my life. In the speech on February 13, 2012, the member for Melbourne speaks about love, stating that it has no boundaries and no limits. However, I say that love is a feeling, just the same as anger, frustration, confusion and hate. I certainly don't feel it necessary to try and convince the Parliament that anyone that I meet that I should be allowed to act upon it. The same Christian values that I was brought up on have helped me to understand that. Can you imagine the consequences for society if we were to legislate acts of violence, for example, due to the feelings of hate? It would be a disaster. Secondly, I made a commitment to the pre-selected of Wright before the last election that I believe that marriage should be between a man and a woman, and that I intend to honour that commitment, a concept sometimes foreign to people on the other side of this House. Thirdly, I question the long-term effects of the amendments to the Marriage Act that it have on children who will become the innocent victims should we fail to ensure that we accurately know and understand what are the psychological and social effects of growing up with same-sex parents. This is not an area that we should be allowing for experimentation. In a speech for the Senate Legal and Constitutional Affairs Legislation Committee for the Marriage Equality Amendment Bill 2010, Friday 4th of May 2012, Professor Tom Frame highlighted the same-sex marriage cements an alienation from one child from one or both biological parents. My last point, Mr Speaker, in relation to the perception that some of the arguments against the bill are discriminatory. My decision is not to support this bill are not aimed to discriminate or separate those who choose to have a same-sex relationship, because I'm convinced that the changes to the Marriage Act, as it currently stands, will do far greater harm to our society. The Prime Minister pointed out on ABC's Q&A on Monday, June 11th, that there is no practical discrimination against same-sex couples in Australia. In 2008, 85 laws were changed in favour of those same-sex relationships and were supported unanimously by Labor and the Coalition, removing all discrimination in the Commonwealth law. State law was genuinely ahead of the Commonwealth on this, but relationship registers or their equivalents in Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania and the ACT ensure that there is no discrimination at state or territory level. I also bring to the attention of the Parliament that his speech of February 13th, member for Melbourne, makes an inaccurate statement when he says that changing the Marriage Act will make it clear to those same-sex relations that the Parliament believes that their love is equal. The Parliament has never, to my knowledge, stopped anyone from falling in love. However, marriage is not an automatic action just because I or someone else should fall in love. That was the case, I'm sure that the majority of society would be married several times over to many people, and heaven to think what would happen to those people who love their pets. In a submission to the Senate inquiry of the Marriage Equality Amendment Bill 2012, family law expert Professor Patrick Parkinson said that in Australia, functionality equality has already been achieved. I'm not aware, he says, of any legal rights obligation that rise from marriage, and I do not also apply to the registered same-sex unions, other than the right of the relationship a marriage. Other than the right to call the relationship a marriage. Certainly that is so in federal law. For example, there is the complete equality in terms of right in relations to the divisions of property and the payment of maintenance and so forth on relationship breakdown. Madam Deputy Speaker, again in completion I say On issues such as significant of this, we want to take it to a federal election, let the people have their thing, and I believe that marriage should be between a man and a woman.